This episode is sponsored by Angular Dev Summit, coming September 11th through the 18th, 2017. Hi, it's Chuck from devchat.tv. I reached out to some of my friends in the Angular community to put on a completely free, no-travel conference for Ruby developers. We have speakers like Rob Wermald, Jeff Welpley, and others coming to speak about all kinds of topics in Angular. So if you're trying to learn Angular or you're trying to level up Angular, come check it out. The talks are happening throughout the day each day, and we'll have a chat available during each session. Attending the talks is free, but you need to register. Go to angulardevsummit.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My JS Story. This week we're going to be talking to Mike North. Mike, do you want to say hi?
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
Now, we had you on episode, I had it right in front of me. We talked to you about Ember and EmberConf about a year ago.
It was sometime last year. Yeah,
episode 211.
About 1 year ago.
Episode 211. So if people are looking for it, they should be able to find it.
Yeah.
You also have a Frontend Masters Series for Ember 2, if I remember right.
I do, and I just filmed a course, or two courses actually, one on SAS and CSS architecture, and another on modern SEO. But don't let the title fool you. It's really about like structured data and AMP pages, all the kinds of things that help you, from a software perspective, stand out. Like if your result is, if you're lucky enough to do the marketing right, like your result will shine and all of the nice metadata will, do its work for you.
Awesome. Now, we brought you on to ask you a bunch of questions about your background, kind of get your story as you developed into a developer. I didn't mean to use both of those words so close together, but anyway, I just find that these stories really help people get an idea of, who's out there being involved in the community. What kind of people, that's the kind of person that's, a front-end master's instructor or whatever. And in a lot of cases, people find, oh, wow, I've had a few people on that people thought, oh, wow, that guy's a coding genius. And, well, it turns out he's only been programming for like 2 years. And so, anyway, it's really interesting to me to just see where everybody comes from and what their experience is. So do you want to tell us how did you get into programming?
Right. Well, it is, as is the case with many people these days, a very nonlinear path, getting to where I am right now. So I started programming as really a teenager. I had a job with a construction company where I was literally, I started out laying drywall and learning a lot of bad words in Spanish. And by the end of it, I was building like a training system so that the company could get off of their paper records and onto this, back then it was a high-tech, e-document system where they just had like a massive amount of scanning into PDFs and filling in forms and things like that. So they needed to train their staff, and I kind of built the training app with little tutorials and things. And that was when I was 15 or 16 back then it was just ASP. I guess now we refer to this as ASP Classic, but that was like 20 years ago. So I've not been doing this for 2 or 3 years, but the things I feel like the things I do day to day, I only learned 2 or 3 years ago.
Right. Now, is that because things are changing so quickly, or is that due to, is computing that different?
Well, it's just that my role in teams and my sort of passion keeps evolving, and really people get to pick what's important to them. Some people go for a job that pays very well or that offers them flexibility. For me, I want to be able to stay on the bleeding edge of things. I really enjoy learning about new programming languages and getting the satisfaction of a really deep understanding of topics. And so I'm constantly learning and then using those brand new skills. So I've been doing this a while, but I am a perpetual beginner. I'm almost always talking about something that I have just really solidified or just figured out how to talk about.
So let's talk about that for a minute. How do you maintain that? Because I have a lot of people asking me, how do I keep current, or how do I keep up, or even, I don't even know what to learn next. So how do you do that? How do you approach that?
That's a great question. It's actually sort of the motivation for why I am doing what I'm doing right now. So that's there is just it is impossible. The direct answer to your question is it's impossible. I mean, if you think about how fast things are moving, and all of the advancements in just in the JavaScript world, you have like progressive web app technologies. TypeScript is seeing a huge surge. Elm is looking really promising, and playing in that pool a little bit would probably benefit your programming as a whole. And you've got like new JavaScript features every month, being promoted farther and farther towards like being the official thing. It is a full-time job to keep track of this stuff. And in previous like more traditional jobs where I was like an architect or a tech lead, it was a real struggle for me to just like chew through all of the GitHub issues on the projects that were important to monitor, and to just stay on top of all of this stuff. So what I do now is I am like an ingester of all of this information, and then I go around and meet with teams and help them absorb it, but in a distilled way, where they don't have to filter through all of the stuff, like figure out which Medium blog posts to read, or which of the dozen frameworks since we started the podcast have come out, like which of those are worth paying attention to. I kind of try to boil it down, give people hands-on experience, and make it so that maybe I drop in like once a quarter, and that frees them from having to personally stay up to speed on everything, because they get this dense, condensed, like rich nugget that they can work with, and they can rely on that being really high quality and really good, and spend the rest of their energy the rest of the time focusing on their product. Because like we need to keep up to speed on this stuff, but we certainly don't get paid for it. And our users, we would have a hard time justifying to our users like, oh well, I really need to make sure we're on top of like what's landing in React 16. Like these fibers look really, really important, and like that is so far away from bottom line factors that like developers really shouldn't be spending so much time trying to like claw their way through this huge amount of information.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did you get into JavaScript and web development?
Another good question. So long after the ASP days, as a like high school student, I actually entered college swearing. Like I basically told people around me, and I hope nobody's keeping close tabs, but I said like, shoot me if you ever see me like writing code all day. I had this image in my mind of like staring at a blue screen, because that was like, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but like it was the old like WordPerfect 5.1 blue screen, gray text. That's how I imagined like writing code to be, this very like impersonal, not exciting thing that was just sort of like a drone job. So I deliberately, like I was going into mechanical engineering, and I deliberately said like absolutely no code. It turns out later, like I really started getting into this stuff. And for me, it was having real world problems that I could solve. And it's like, and this math has the same like challenge around it, where like a lot of the instruction is in this like abstract world where, if you're one of these people who sort of wants to ask why until you establish relevance, you're sort of like protective of your own attention. You don't want to learn like differential equations until you figure out, oh yeah, this is probably useful for solving such and such a problem, which you actually do care about this. All right, now let's dig into it. So once I found like that writing small programs could help me do things that I was really interested in. And these were like homework assignments. I had a great course in college where we built a robot every week using like a subset of C. We could put like 8K of code onto these little like microcontrollers, and like whatever you didn't use for code, you could use that for like runtime memory. And every week we built a new robot, and it went from like find your way through a maze and you get the maze ahead of time to like you no longer get the maze ahead of time, and then like can't guarantee that there's even a solution to this maze, and sort of advanced in difficulty. So like once I connected it to something that was really exciting and invigorating, it started to seem fun. So I went down that path and I wrote engineering simulation code for a while. Like this is the stuff they use to shape Formula One race cars. Like this is the actual application that they use. A lot of Formula One teams use to make sure that their aerodynamics, hold the car to the ground and give them the traction they're looking for. But and I had like special domain expertise in this particular niche. Unfortunately, it had nothing to do with the web, and this was like 2006, 2007. Basically, the iPhone comes out, and I had this moment of clarity where I just like I felt like that is something I wanted to be a part of, and at the time you couldn't write apps for these iPhones, right? Because they launched it without the App Store. So I started to get into like Sensha Touch and jQuery Mobile, these like JavaScript frameworks that could make something that looked like it shipped on the phone, but it was built completely using web technology. And I liked doing it so much that I actually I ran a consultancy where I had 5 contractors working full time for me at one point. Like for 3 years, I ran this consultancy at night in addition to my day job, where I would take on new projects, and each project would have like some skill in it that I needed and I didn't have yet. Like I took on a Ruby on Rails job. I didn't know Ruby on Rails yet, but I had 8 years of Java experience, and I used some Java web technology, and I kind of budgeted enough time in there so that I could kind of put the learning curve on the critical path, maybe bring someone in that knows what they're doing so they can check over everything, and kind of use those real world projects as stepping stones to the point where I could make, building for the web and using JavaScript my full-time gig.
Cool. So when we had you on the show, we had you come on to talk about Ember. So where does Ember fit in all of this?
Right. So when I started working at Yahoo, so shortly after I, moved from building desktop engineering apps and started building for the web, the next big step for me was like getting out to Silicon Valley, right? Because it was this time in my life when I had a ton of energy, and I was feeling like I was short on mentors, and I just wanted to be like, I felt like if I was in the right community, I could thrive. So I interviewed at a bunch of companies, ended up working at Yahoo because I wanted to be part of a turnaround story. And at least at the time, mind you, this was like 2012, it looked like that was possible. Hindsight's 2020. Didn't quite work out that way. But when I landed at Yahoo, there was a need to so every tech lead had their own stack, right? Everyone had their own grunt file or gulp file, and just switching teams was almost like taking a job at a new company. Like the learning curve was that severe. So where Ember came in is that was part of a tech stack that, when we started using it, it allowed us to kind of treat engineers as resources towards, the larger goal of building all of these apps together and potentially like merging some of them together instead of all of these separated, like, distinct pockets of different technology everywhere. So that's where I started to pick up Ember, and that was sort of like, I guess I took an opportunity where there were very few experts at the time, and just dove in and really tried to I tried to exhaustively learn it, meaning there were areas where like maybe I didn't get to touch on it in my day-to-day work. Like maybe it's like setting up a deployment pipeline, for example. Typically you arrive in a team and like it's already set up and you don't do that. Well, I was like eager to learn it comprehensively. So I would even try to get a side project together where I could like see what it's like to deploy this thing and make sure that I got the full picture. And eventually that sort of path led to some pretty deep expertise where, that's, it's one of these things where we work with it for 5 years, 6 years. You can do some pretty neat things with it, no matter what technology it is. Like that amount of familiarity turns it into a pretty potent thing in the hands of that person.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what contributions do you feel like you've made to the JavaScript and Ember communities?
Right, that is another great question. I think so. In thinking about contributions, like the way in which I've contributed has evolved over time. So I have at one time been a person that wrote a ton of libraries, like a library per week. And I have at times been the kind of person who dives deep into like issues in the framework itself and, sorted through them and tried to spec things out and come up with a solution that makes everybody happy. But there was sort of always this hole, and I found I was sort of mad that it wasn't properly addressed, properly covered by someone. Or I shouldn't say that, because people have definitely worked on covering it, but I just always felt like it could use more hands. And that is representing like newcomers to a technology. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the way that I have an impact now. I do a lot of workshops. I think basically these days, every Ember conference there is, I am probably doing a workshop or had some sort of conflict where I couldn't do one, but I'm turning into like the workshop person. Right. And I really I get, just like some people get genuine satisfaction out of finding like a marginal performance improvement or a way to reduce a kilobyte over like in their JavaScript app. I get that same kind of satisfaction from like having a room full of people that are confused and sending them out sorted, right? Like I literally get almost an adrenaline rush from doing that. I really am passionate about enabling people. So that today is what I'm most known for, teaching, enabling people, and making those light bulbs turn on.
Nice. So I'm curious then, and this is more of kind of a personal interest of mine. How do you structure the learning then to make it so that it's approachable for people, especially new people coming in? And related to that, usually when you're talking about new people to a technology, you're talking about two different groups. One is new people, so new programmers, and the other group is, okay, I've been coding in whatever for a while, and now I'm coming and learning this new technology.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to answer them in reverse order. Okay. So in terms of how you address both of those audiences, so we'll call them like beginners, newcomers to programming, and newcomers to a topic within programming. Mm-hmm. So I find that, well, first of all, when you're talking about newcomers to programming, there's a pretty alarming statistic out there. We are hiring computer programmers at a rate that's about 400% of the rate at which we can graduate CS majors from like traditional bachelor's degree CS programs. So like the demand for software engineers far exceeds our ability to educate them in a conventional way. So it's very clear we need to be doing a very good job and taking people from backgrounds like boot camps really seriously. In fact, like these days, like if I'm looking for a junior engineer, I will turn to a boot camp way before I will start interviewing people from the top tech schools, simply because their experience is more likely to be practical and more likely to be oriented towards like the real stuff we're doing day to day, right? What I learned to do in college, like designing an operating system and building a device driver, I'm not sure where that fits in the world of web technology. I mean, it was interesting. It sort of played into a broader ability to solve problems, but it's not like React, and it's not Python, and it's not something that I'm going to tap into except in a rare moment. So there's a lot of material out there for like true beginners. Free Code Camp is a great example there, where people can sort of teach themselves and get to a certain point. Then there's this huge chasm, and then we reach the second category of people you talk about, where you're like, okay, you are an established programmer new to this technology. So that gap between like I have shown you the ropes of JavaScript and a React component, like leading all the way up to I assume you have experience building at full scale. Here are the details of our API. Like there needs to be something in there to fill it, and I think we're about to feel the pain of not having enough material there really, really quickly. And this is where we can do better with like video courses and with books and with tutorials in trying to make them a little bit more accessible. The only hope we really have is to sort of reach to go through a little extra effort and make the content we intend to be for our peer developers also accessible to newcomers who have less experience. Because like to ask people to go back and fill that gap explicitly, that's a big ask. That is like almost community service from the developer standpoint. And I don't think it's likely to happen. But I'm trying to, so I spend a lot of my time working with the developers at LinkedIn, and they have a great mix of people from boot camps. We just hired a little over 30 of them, and they're ridiculously promising. I mean, I'll be honest, I was a little I didn't know what to expect when we hired them, and then they arrived, and my mind is just blown at how much energy and passion and technical acumen they have. But like, I'm trying to work with this whole group of people to help the more senior developers relate a little bit better and sort of pull these less experienced people up. I think that's what it means to be a senior engineer or a staff engineer, that you can really like, every time you have an interaction with somebody, you teach them. So when I'm building material, I try to make the lower bound for it, like the minimum amount of experience you can get away with and still get value out of this. I try to push it as low as possible without sort of compromising the whole mission. And that means like unpacking some of the jargon. That means stopping to explain a term, or at least providing a reference where someone can, on their own time, go on their own learning trail and then kind of get back on with everybody else and continue on. Just because, we need to be preparing these people so that they are our future colleagues and teammates.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of the techniques I use, I've been disappointed by a lot of books and tutorials and video courses and trainings that sort of just scrape the surface. They kind of give you a little taste, just enough to make you hungry, and then you're left without the tools you need to then walk away and take what you've learned and sort of deploy it in a problem that matters to you. So I typically have students spend at least 50% of their time solving problems that I've set up for them. So like I always have failing tests with each exercise, and they kind of code to pass the tests. They're always, not trivial. And if like the courses I'm most proud of, I end up kind of having a couple different levels to them, so that more experienced developer can sort of go for the bonus points and try to reach for higher level of objectives. But qualitatively, they're working on the same thing as the bootcamp graduate that just joined the company last week. They're all building the same thing, just one person's going deeper than the other. It takes a lot of time to build this kind of curriculum, but this is sort of the luxury of not making teaching an aspect of a larger job or a side job, but rather the core mission that I'm on right now.
That's really interesting. And I'd love to dig into this more. I don't know if we really have time in an interview like this, but just the whole aspect of teaching developers and helping them grow and level up is really, really interesting. And I think it does take a level of empathy, right? It's like, what was it like when I was trying to figure this stuff out? And what were the things that helped me get through it? And in a lot of cases for me, it was the fact that I had some mentorship, some help from somebody that was interested in the outcome that I had in being able to contribute either to the code, the team, or whatever. And I feel like, okay, here's a problem, now go solve it. And, having that kind of, that help and that, so that it's not just me out there on my own trying to figure this crap out, is really helpful. And I really like that approach of, making it practical and hands-on, and at the same time, not leaving people high and dry with just enough knowledge to not know what they're doing. So the last thing that we do on this show is picks. And you've been on the show before, so are there things you want to shout out about?
Have you ever felt like you're falling behind, or that the programming world is moving so fast that it's impossible to keep up? Then there's the issue of where to go to make sure you're up to date. The answer is to join a community dedicated to discussing the latest in JavaScript. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you got JavaScript jabber all day? Well, you can, kind of. We've created a Slack community for JavaScript jabber. That means that you can connect with our listeners and guests on a platform you're most likely already using. Plus, we've set up a Keeping Current channel that pulls stories from across the web to help you know what people are talking about. And coming soon, we'll be holding monthly webinars and roundtable video chats to connect with experts in the community and with each other. So come join us at javascriptjabber.com/Slack.
There are. So I'm preparing a TypeScript course, and part of my research is to read a bunch of books, and I have a favorite that is free that I would like to give a shout out to. So it's a Git book, which means it is sort of a GitHub based thing that you can download on your iPad or your Kindle, and it's just called TypeScript Deep Dive. And I hope, well, there's no hope I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of the author's name, but it is Basarat Ali Syed. So this is not just a great TypeScript book, but as we see that sort of the JavaScript spec is more and more taking on things that TypeScript has had for a long time, this is just a great book for modern JavaScript developers to read, right? So if you're reading through this, like you'll start to see things that, like, oh, I heard that this is being discussed. It's a potential part of what the language will be in the future. Like TypeScript, they already know about it. They've been using it. So as I was going through this, it's fantastically written. It is very example based, and the examples are nice and bite sized and make their point. So check it out, TypeScript Deep Dive. The second pick is a new introduction to the JavaScript spec. So it is the proposal for async iteration. This just recently went from stage 2 to stage 3. Stage 3 means it will very probably make it into the language itself. It is a beautifully written proposal in a nice markdown document, and particularly, I want listeners to think about how they might write things like acceptance tests using async iteration, right? So think about using this with async and await and inversion of control. Like, it's a really powerful idea, and I think it's going to be like a major game changer that people will build libraries on top of, and we'll be doing new things with JavaScript that just weren't possible before.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in here with a few picks myself. One of the things that I really like when I'm writing TypeScript is Visual Studio Code. We've had some of their developers on there for a while, or on the show a while back, and it seems like every time I go to a Microsoft event, we wind up talking to somebody about it. Anyway, it's a terrific, I don't know if you call it an IDE or a text editor, because it kind of splits the difference in a very nice way. But yeah, definitely check that out. And we'll put links to that and the episodes that we've done with the Visual Studio Code team in the show notes. And then also, since you're a Frontend Masters author or instructor, or I don't know what the official title is, I'm going to shout out about Frontend Masters. They've got a terrific lineup of just awesome courses on this stuff. And one thing that I like about it is that you get to see the teacher presenting the information as well as their screen as they work through the problems. And the courses that I've watched, they're actually writing code and then explaining what it is and working through the problems with you. And that's, for me anyway, a very helpful way to learn to code. So anyway, a big shout out to them because they're awesome. Mike, if people want to follow up with you or see what you're working on these days or go to one of your workshops or anything like that, what should they do?
So on Twitter, I'm Michael L. North, and my website is just mike.works. And in particular, like I've got a lot of information about courses on there, and just love teaching people. So if you are interested in like attending one of these workshops, or maybe there's a video course I have somewhere that I can point you to, just click on the little like intercom chat widget in the lower right corner, and I will send you in the right direction anytime.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for coming, Mike.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
We'll have another story next week.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.